Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a comparison and sort of review of a very famous locomotive, the Pennsylvania Railway K4 Pacific. And yeah, so what we're going to be comparing is the Bachmann K4 versus the MTH HOK4. As you can see here, we have three engines in front here, and that is because actually I have two Bachmann K4s. One of them was a purchase I intended to buy, and the other one was a kind of a it was a good deal, kind of like, no thinking, just good deal, I just bought it. And so yeah, so in the back we have a Bachmann post-war Pennsylvania Railway K4. In the front here, or in the middle I guess you could say, is a Bachmann pre-war K4. In the front is an MTH pre-war K4, and this is actually an older sort of model, where not older model per se, but an older K4 in the sense that it has the striping, as you can see right here on the tender and on the wheels, which is really fancy. Alright, now a little bit about the history of the K4. The Pennsylvania K4, known to be the most famous engine class in the Pennsylvania railway system, was a 462 Pacific steam locomotive. 425 were built between 1914 and 1928 as Pennsylvania Railway's premier passenger hauling steam locomotive. The engines quickly showed their superior performance, with a tractive effort rating of 44,460 pound force, and its massive 680-inch diameter driving wheels able to reach speeds of over 80 miles per hour. Attempts to replace the class were made, such as the K5 and the T1, but neither was successful. Starting in 1945 through the 1950s, the K4s received upgrades, resulting in an altered appearance. This is differentiated by the pre-war and post-war differentiation. Other experimental modifications were added to certain K4s, including two types of streamlining, disc drivers, poppet valves, roller bearings, elephant ears, and others. Later, some received coast-to-coast tenders, which were massive tenders. Some were even actually longer than the engine itself. Near the end of steam on the Pennsylvania Railway, the K4s were being double and even triple-headed due to their longer passenger trains. By the 1960s, all but two were scrapped. 1361 and 3750 are preserved for static display, with 1361 in need of funding for a full mechanical restoration. Now let's get a close-up of each of these engines. Alright, so to begin with, take a look at the Bachmann engines, and then I'll compare between the post-war and pre-war versions, and then we'll take a look at the MTH engine. So to begin off, we'll look at the front of the Bachmann pre-war engine, and you'll note that there's a very beautiful boilerplate here with a separately applied handrail, a very nice looking keystone with printed 5475, which is the number for this engine. You'll see a headlight, and to note, Bachmann's K4's headlights are very dim. They are LED, however the LED is actually inside the boiler facing up, and then there's a piece of plastic that kind of transfers the LED light to the front, and that makes the light very dim, and I'm not a huge fan of that. I usually add a SMD LED, it's like a tiny LED that can fit inside here. I usually like to customize my engines by adding one of those in these headlights. Anyways, down here we'll see the handrails, or whatever we call it, grab irons, with this little step here so people can step down onto the pilot. The pilot has these vertical bracings, a coupler in the front. There's two marker lights here, and two marker lights up here. This is a pre-war signature. There's 4 marker lights in total, and they all look the same. They have this very signature looking Pennsylvania marker light, which looks kind of funny, but I really do like the look of them. And then last is an uncoupling lever in the front, which this one doesn't seem to really work, but anyways, it is a separately applied metal piece. Alright, moving on to the boiler, we'll see that in the front there's a generator, the dynamo generator. It's mounted behind the headlight and in front of the smokestack. Here's a builder's plate, which I'll show you a photo of right now. The handrail that comes along goes over the boiler and also under it here. Here's the sando with a separately applied metal handrail, and also some more piping, as you can see over here, and over here, and over there. Here's the air compressor, an air tank, and again it's more piping coming out of it. And then, yeah, if we move over to the Bell Pair Firebox, which is really famous, it's a famous trait of Pennsylvania railway engines. As you can see, it's square. This actually provides far more pulling power than you think, considering how, you know, minusculely larger it is. But anyways, yeah, there's some plugs here, some more handrails, and another handrail. And then in the back here, where the cab is, there is a plastic kind of piece of piping detail. Let me actually zoom in there. The camera's probably going to go out of focus. I do apologize. There we go. You kind of see it right there. The cab itself has really nicely printed numbers, and this is painted red. And then there's no window inserts, unfortunately. And there's a little figure inside there, which again, I should show another photo right now so you can get a closer look at that. And so yeah. If we take a look down onto the drive rods, we'll see that the wheels are all painted black, which is prototypical. The MTH one is a little unique in that way. I'll explain it a little more later. But yeah, so they're all black. The treads are painted black. The axle, it's kind of hard to see, but the axle ends, tips are also painted black, which is really nice. And yeah, everything's metal, including the rods and the wheels. So yeah, it looks pretty good. If we look at the top here, you'll see the smokestack. The plastic bell that does not swing. If we move over, you'll see the sand dome again. Here's a little grab iron. Over here, let me focus, like that. You'll see the plastic whistle, which it is sideways, and it's actually correct. It looks weird, but it is correct. And the two safety valves up here. These are also plastic, and you can see there is the line, I think it's a molding line coming kind of through there, and it's kind of fake, but I mean it's there, so that's good enough for me. And at the very back there, you can see a few nice looking valves on this piece up here, which I'm not really sure what this box is, but yeah, some nice valves. And at the very top of the cab, there's this unmovable hatch vent there. Also, one thing to note I forgot to say is that because this engine was used and not new, the original owner tried to paint. It looks like they used a hand brush and some really poor paint, but they tried to hand paint the cab and the tender, as you can kind of see back there. But you see the paint quality is very poor. There's like cracks, and it's really uneven. And so yeah, that is not from the manufacturer. This is so you guys don't need to worry if you buy one of these yourself. It would just be black, like the tender and the cab. Alright, moving to between the cab and the tender, you'll see there's more handrails on both the cab and the tender, which is made really nice. They're both metal. Here's a deck plate right there, which is metal, and it also swings. And then underneath here, it's kind of hard to see, but there's two plastic white plugs. And one thing to note is that the wires on these plugs are different colors, so it's kind of noticeable that like there's a brown wire, as you can see right there. But it's really hard to see because it's really dark down there. If we take a look inside the cab, as you can see I'm holding a light right here. You see the two cab figures, and you see the little step that they press on to open the firebox. Or the, whatever they call this, the box, the doors that open so you can put coal inside. The figures you can see right there. The cab inside is unpainted, but there is molded detail, and it looks okay. I mean, no one ever looks inside there really, but it's a nice touch. On the engineer side, of the engine, you'll see there's more piping here. There's the power reverse, another air tank, and then the running board goes along here. The running board actually has no detail. It's completely smooth. There's no treading or anything like that. But then there's also just more piping and stuff like that. This pipe goes to the power reverse, and yeah, it's for the most part pretty similar to the other side. On top of the tender, we see a fairly realistic looking coal load. I think this one definitely does look better than the MTH one. However, it is a little more glossy, so it depends on, your personal preference. But yeah, it looks pretty good. Underneath the Bachmann tender, we can see the water scoop right here. And this basically just lets the train pick up water, which would be laid out underneath the track here. It's actually a really cool system. Back then, in order to pick up water without having to stop the engine, they'd have a pile of water basically along the tracks, and then the train would go by at speed, and this scoop would be down, and it just push water up into the tender, which is really cool. But anyways, you can see right here, the scoop is laid out open right now, and we can compare that later to the MTH one, which is closed. Besides that, we also have some braking detail and an air tank right there. Alright, now onto the rear of the tender. As you can see, the print on the side of the tender is really nice. I'm not really sure if this is correct or not. I believe the pre-war engine should have a smaller font Pennsylvania. I'll show you a picture of it right now. And Yeah, so this is not really prototypical. However, they did, swap tenders very often. So this is, it's not like impossible. It is sort of unlikely, but it's, I think it looks better personally. So it may not be completely correct, but it looks good at least. On the top here, you'll see that there are some handrails. They're really nice. They're metal and they're very thin, as well as a pretty thick ladder. As well as these handrails on top of right here. Those are molded in though in the plastic, but they are separate. You can stick something through it that I'm not going to try right now. Now toward the back, you'll see there's two more of these funny looking markers. 1, 2, the ladder, which is pretty thick to be honest. It's a pretty thick looking ladder. The tender hatch, which is right here, which is molded in. The guy painted it black for some reason. There are more handrails. Let me try focusing here. More handrails on each end. And there's a uncoupling lever here in the back. And there are more, let me try focusing here. There are some more handrails right there. You can see there's 2 more on each end, and as also the print on the tender here also looks very crisp and very well done. And then one last thing to mention is that the tender shell is plastic, so it is kind of light, but there's enough weight inside there so it wouldn't derail. Alright, now let's take a look at Bachmann's post-war engine. Now to note, I actually spent a great deal of time, customizing this engine. I added a lot of details to this engine. I do plan to post a video showing off that, but in the meantime, I have to point out that some details I added / modified are custom, so they're probably not on there. But I will show you what things that Bachmann do to make their post-wars look different. So as you can see, now there's the handrail, which originally was down here, is now mounted upwards, kind of upside down. The generator, for some reason, I don't know why Pennsylvania Railway used to do this, but they put the generator in front and the headlight on top. The headlight has a different shape. It's kind of rounded in the back, and it's also somewhat smaller. The dynamo generator, as I said, it lists in the front. Here's a really, I think it's like a maintenance plate, but I don't really know why Pennsylvania Railway used to do this, but this is, the Bachmann version is correct, is accurate in that sense. But there is a plate in front, which is kind of signature to the K4 look. It's kind of weird though. Anyways, I originally did not like the look of it, but then it's kind of grown on me. So yeah, the handrails, as you can see, are molded on, but you can see that they're pretty well molded, so they look like they're separately applied. In the front, here is a slate pilot. That's what they call it. It's like a one-piece, ginormous metal pilot with no, it's like just one piece. There's 3 handrails, as you can see, one here, one there. And the coupler in the front, and there's also some hoses in the front here, which you really can't see, unfortunately. But yeah, and then you can also see the handrail coming down here, and that's pretty much it. On the top here, you'll see that there's some markers up here. Another detail I added myself is this steam generator / dynamo exhaust pipe, which you can see comes from the generator itself, and then it comes along, and then it comes, and then it goes up there. That is obvious. I added that myself. Obviously, Bachmann's didn't come with that. And in fact, for the most part, the engine is pretty much identical to the pre-war version, the boiler and everything like that. There are a few differences. As I said, I'll note those right now. The only difference between this and the pre-war version on the engineer side is that there's an extra toolbox right here. And over on the top of the boiler, there's a few more differences. One thing is this extra pipe here, which I added myself. This was not originally in the model. None of this pipe was here. I'm not really sure what this does, but I did compare it to prototype photos and it was present, so yeah. There's another kind of like plate here, and this what I'm assuming what it does is it angles the whistle's steam upwards, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, this is present on the post-war version and looks pretty cool. And lastly, there's this other pipe here, and I'll actually flip the engine around and show you that in more detail. Alright, on this side, this is where the details could become a little different. Now, just to start off, the only thing that Bachmann did for post-war and pre-war version differences is I said this thing and this thing. Everything else on this side is exactly the same as the pre-war version. Now, the fact that you see all this extra piping is things I added myself, so just be aware of that. Alright, so let's see what I did. So there is because of this pipe, there's 2 extra pipes coming down here. And then as you can see in the firebox area, there's a whole bunch more piping that just goes along the engine. Some of them go to the second dome, some of them come down here, and then more of it just run down here, and etc. So yeah, you see there's a lot more piping on the post-war version. But unfortunately, Bachmann does not add that stuff to the post-war version engine themselves. I had to do that myself, which is unfortunate, but I mean, you pay less for a model, would expect. But yeah, other than that, there's not many differences between the post-war and the pre-war version. It's mostly actually just the pilot itself in the front. Everything else is more or less the same. Alright, now let's compare the Bachmann engine to the MTH engine. We'll start with the pilot. There's a metal, cast metal, die-cast metal, I guess say, pilot. Similar to the pre-war version, there's a coupler in the front. There's an uncoupling lever right here, which is metal. There's two plastic marker lights, and also the same handrails. And then on the, what is it called, the boiler front, I guess you could say, there's the, another very well-made keystone number plate, as you see right there. And then also there's the separately applied handrail right there, as well as the headlight up here. The boiler, which by the way is made entirely of metal, so it's very heavy, but that comes to bite itself later, which is really weird. But anyways, yeah, so the boiler is metal. It has a very nice metallic bell, which swings, as you can see. The sand dome, which is separate with a separately applied handrail. This piping, which is all very nice. It is plastic though, but there's some really nice separately applied plastic handrails, or just piping, I guess you could say. An air compressor, an air tank right there. Up here's a second dome. I'm not really sure what this is, as I said. Please comment down below, by the way, if you know. And then toward the back, you'll see there's another very nice piping detail. However, what you'll notice is that MTH, because, well, I don't really know because, but they have, for some reason, molded detail, like this pipe right here, and also this right here. This is entirely molded into the boiler. Not to say it doesn't look good, but, I mean, it's molded. Come on, MTH. I paid, I mean, you know, the list price is $4.99. Come on. Anyways, again, very well, you know, molded, the bell pair firebox. You know, the handrails going along, looks really nice. And another leaf spring and the rear trailing truck right there. And then, as you can see in the cab, there are window inserts. There's a crew figure inside. The windows I don't believe open. And there's some more plastic piping down here. I also forgot to mention this, but here's a look at the builder's plate. As you can see, it's very legible. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that on this side, you can see there's this really noticeable piece of molded piping, which I gotta admit looks pretty fake. I don't know why MTH did this. You know, it should be painted black, so I honestly personally prefer it to be omitted than present and just look like this. Because at least I can add my own, you know, whereas this, I can't do anything about it. It's a die-cast boiler, so yeah. On the engineer side of the boiler, we have pretty much the same detail as Bachmann's did, with this extra bit of piping, the power reverse with the line that goes to the cab, more piping over here. This is all plastic, by the way. The piping is all plastic. However, this handrail here is metal. Yeah, there's another air tank, and then more of the very beautiful drivers and all the valve rods and linkages. Down below, we have some very nicely lined wheels, including driving wheels. These look amazing. Now, as I said to note, this engine is designed to be modeled roughly around like the K4, how it looked in like the 1930s, with all this extra striping and everything like that, which looks really nice, by the way. But you know, the Pennsylvania pre-war K4 is not designed to look like the 1930s. It's actually designed to look more like the 1940, particularly 1940, like right before the modifications and the upgrades. So obviously by then, all of this nice gold, you know, leaf lining is gone. So this is prototypical and it looks really nice. However, you know, Bachmann's engine is not wrong to have just straight up, you know, like without lining and just regular black wheels. Something to note though, the axles, the metal axles, are actually easily seen, which is really weird because they should be painted over with this green. Up on top we can see the safety valves and the whistle. I do believe these are metal. They aren't brass, I don't believe, but they are some sort of metal, and they're very nicely polished. They're very, very shiny. And yeah, so is the whistle here. Also a very really nice metal whistle. One thing I forgot to mention about both engines is that one of the characteristics common to all Pennsylvania steam engines, with a few exceptions, is that the boiler and all its paint is like the black looking paint is actually not black. It's actually a very dark green. It's called Brunswick green. And MTH nailed it with this really dark, lovely shade of green. But Bachmann engines, both this one and the pre-war, post-war version in the back, is just regular black, which is definitely a mistake, and it is kind of noticeable. However, I mean, you know, you're paying less, you get what you pay for, and the black looks nice too, so whatever. But yeah, I just want to note that the MTH version does have the correct paint. On top of the cab on the MTH model, you'll also see the latch here, and this actually does open and close. It is very loose though, so you know, any slight shuffling can open and close it, which is both an upside down and a downside. But yeah, it's nice that it does operate though. Inside the cab of the MTH engine, we see that there are window inserts as well as this red trim. And then we focus on inside of the cab like that. You'll see there's a bunch of molded on detail depicting the inside of the cab. They're all one-piece mold and it's the same color, and there's two figures inside. So that's pretty cool. Down to where the cab meets the tender, you'll see that there's metal handrails on both the cab and the tender, and there's this little plastic deck plate, and it has like the really nice looking tread on it, as you can see right there. If I could focus it, yeah, you can see right there. I'd like to also note how clean the connection looks, with only one single drawbar and no other wires or anything like that. Now this, again, will come to bite MTH back later. However, I just want to note that it looks good. On top of the tender, we have a fairly realistic looking plastic coal load. It's not the greatest I've seen, but it's also not that bad. If we move on to the side of the tender, we can see on the die-cast tender shell, which this entire thing is die-cast, makes it really heavy. You can see the Pennsylvania lining here, and this Pennsylvania is the correct font for the pre-war version, but I personally actually prefer the post-war version where the Pennsylvania term is stretched out. That's just personal preference, and I know it's incorrect on my Bachmann pre-war version, but you know, I like that look. Anyways, yeah, so this is the correct lining, and then also all this beautiful striping and everything like that. The gold leaf striping looks really nice on the tender. And also lastly, you can see the rivets, which are very nicely molded into the die-cast shell. Underneath the tender, we can see there's a water scoop and some piping and brake air tanks, and etc. And you can see that unlike the Bachmann one, which the scoop is open, this one is closed. And lastly, on the rear of the tender, it is painted this really nice red, by the way, along with the cab roof. There's the ladder and the two hand grab irons, whatever. They're very thin, very nicely applied. There's the water hatch, which is actually, this is actually my own. Yeah, when I bought it, it actually came missing, so this is my own. It's supposed to be red, so if you do purchase one of these engines, the tender hatch will be red, but on mine it's black because I added my own. Anyways, yeah, that's there. There are marker lights, which, here, let me focus on that real quick. Right there. There's two marker lights on each end, and there's also this middle one right there. That is actually the rear light, and that does light up on the MTH model. It does not light up on the Bachmann model. In fact, I think the Bachmann model is missing that entirely. But, yeah, that's no biggie. Also, you can see the ladder, which is definitely a, you know, better ladder because it's not as thick as the Bachmann version. And you can see, obviously, more striping. And lastly, you can see the printing on the end right there, which I'll give a closer photo of it right now. And yeah, there's also the uncoupling lever here and some more handrails and then a coupler in the rear. And on the very rear, you can see, take a better look at the backup light. But anyways, you can also see the PRR, as well as the very nicely printed tender details, probably about how much water it can fill and anything like that. But anyways, yeah, it's very nicely printed. I cannot read it in real life, but I'm sure the camera could probably pick it up. I'll show a picture of it right now. And yeah, there's also this uncoupling lever and a KD coupler, as well as more grab irons on each end. And then lastly, there's this really nice looking what is a steam pipe, and also uncoupling lever on the right side right there. Something to note is that MTH's cab roof and tender deck is painted the same kind of bright red, and this is actually not correct. In fact, if you compare it to the engine back there, which is a Broadway Limited engine, which is correct, you'll notice that the tender deck is painted this boxcar red, which is more or less accurate. But the cab roof is supposed to be painted a different color. It's actually a Tuscan red, which is more of a brown color, actually. So, technically this color is incorrect. However, they at least tried, if you compare it to Bachmann's, which is just both painted black, definitely does look better than that. However, that's just something to consider while purchasing this engine. Alright, now onto a kind of odd topic. Both engines have very unique drawbar systems. They're not your normal, metal drawbar with 2 holes or 3 holes or whatever, and you can stick the pin on the tender into one of the holes and then it will run. Neither of these are like that. We'll begin with the Bachmann system. The Bachmann system has this really weird plastic thick drawbar, and it requires removing 2 screws on the tender in order to fit the drawbar in. It's a pretty cool system where basically, the drawbar pulls the engine and tender closer in on straight track, but then it lets them separate a little further on curved track, which makes it so it could have a more realistic look. However, it's a real pain, and there's no, you can't move the engine and tender any closer or further away. It's set at that very specific distance, and yeah, it's also, as I said, permanent, where you have to remove 2 screws to pull it out. It's a real pain and a real hassle. However, it does do its purpose. On the other hand, MTH has a very questionable drawbar. It is very well designed in the sense that it's it basically has built-in wires, so the engine and tender can communicate without having that awful, like 10 or 8 wire plug. The drawbar kind of conceals it all together. So it's good in that design. However, it's a very weak and brittle drawbar because the drawbar is literally the PCB board, which, if you guys don't know, is a really brittle piece of plastic, really brittle piece of thin plastic. The same thing that you use to make motherboards and other electronics. So it's not metal. It's a very thin, brittle piece of plastic. And in fact, mine actually broke when mine arrived. I bought mine used, granted, but still, it was broken when I arrived after fixing it myself. So yeah, and also it's also a really weird system where you gotta push it into the tender side, and then you gotta like angle it. It's a really weird thing. It's kind of hard to explain, but yeah, it kind of does its job, but it's also a very weak design and prone to breakage. In fact, a lot of these K4s break because of the tender. Alright, now let's begin with the mechanism for the Bachmann engine. So, to begin, I want to talk about the pickups for the engine. The front 2 wheels do not pick up power. The 6 driving wheels both pick up power on each side, so that's 6 pickup points. The trailing truck does not pick up power. And as far as the tender trucks go, each truck picks up power from one side. So the front truck picks up, the 2 wheels pick up power from the right, and then the rear 2 wheels pick up power from the left. So that's another 4 pickup points. So in total there is 10 pickup points on this engine. Alright, and now about the power itself for the engine. So it is powered by a single 5-pole can motor, which through some gears powers the rear driving wheel here. This driver wheel then brings power to the other 2 driving wheels through these rods right here. The wheels, obviously metal, have no bearings and they are not sprung, so the wheel axles simply just sit inside the die-cast chassis, which is, it's not bad. It's not amazing, it's not the highest quality, but you only pay, $100 for this engine, so you kind of get what you expect. And we can compare that to the MTH engine a bit later. Another thing to note is that the front truck is sprung. The rear one kind of just sits floppily, like you can just easily move it left and right. It just is connected to the chassis with one spring, but there's no with one screw, my bad, but no springs, nothing like that. And the rear wheels are just screwed in. The MTH K4 is powered by one 5-pole can motor. It powers the center driving wheel, which then brings power to the other 2 wheels through the driving rods. The wheels themselves are obviously metal, and they have bearings. They have nice copper bearings, which should, in theory, make them last longer. However, I can't prove that. And those bearings do sit in springs, so as a result, the wheels are sprung. Now, that feature is common in brass engines, which is pretty awesome. However, I think that might be actually the reason why this engine pulls so poorly, considering its weight. which we will discuss later. But anyways, yeah, it's a nice feature. It shows their quality. But I don't really know how much it helps, or I guess doesn't help the performance characteristics of this engine. Another thing I forgot to mention is that the front truck, the rear truck, and the tender trucks are all sprung, as you can see right here. Alright, now a little bit about the weight and pulling power of these engines. Now, just to start right off, I do not have a way to test pulling power. I don't have that scale thing. So I am just going to be using my past experiences with these two engines in order to declare that. But anyways, the Bachmann engine with its plastic boiler and tender shell weighs 1 pound 2 ounces. The MTH engine with its die-cast metal boiler and its die-cast metal tender weighs 1.69 ounces. Now, you might think with those numbers that the MTH can pull far more than the Bachmann engine. However, that's actually not true. Because if you think about it, the MTH engine, the inside is hollow. The inside has a steam generator taking up this much space, and then the motor taking up the rest, right? So this is mostly empty inside. And the tender is also taking up a lot of weight because it's metal. The metal tender versus the plastic tender means that more weight is diverged to the tender. And this has a speaker system and everything like that. The Bachmann engine, the tender is pretty much hollow. There's obviously weight in there to make sure it doesn't derail, but there's something else inside there. And the boiler inside is just full of metal to add more weight to it. There's a motor obviously here, but this entire section here is just full of just metal, which makes this pull far more than this. In fact, this can only pull about 4 Bachmann P70 coaches before the wheel starts just to slip out of control. Whereas the Bachmann engine can pull an entire Pennsylvania sort of prototypical express passenger train, which is pretty crazy. Considering, like my Atlantic, my Gem Brass Pennsylvania Atlantic, which is E6, which is a 442, can pull, roughly the same amount as this engine can. It's kind of disappointing, but, you get what you take. So, yeah, that's just something to note. Alright, now let's do a quick little bit of testing to see how the engine performs. We'll begin with some slow speed testing. So I have this engine. Okay, I have this engine connected to my DC controller, and so let's start it up. Now I'm using a Bachmann, cheapo, train pack controller because this is only a DC controller I have. But let's see how it works. Turning the power up. That's my my basement. Excuse me. Try to ignore that. There we go. I don't know if you can tell, it's completely silent. Turning the throttle up. Ooh, there we go. Try to bring the power down. So, it's not amazing slow speed control, but it's present. And I'm sure if you had a DCC decoder, it'd be a lot better. It is very smooth though, and it's very quiet too. Very, very smooth. All you can hear is the wheels. Yeah, not amazing slow speed control though. I mean, what do you expect? These are ginormous wheels, right? So... anyways, it's a very, very smooth engine. Alright, now let's compare it to the MTH engine. Alright, actually, before I do that, let me compare it to the Bachmann engine, and this one's equipped with TCS wow sound. So, yeah. Let's see how it performs under DCC control. So if we turn to speed step 1, 2... look at that. That is amazing, right? So yeah, with a DCC controller, or with a DCC decoder, it can, be a lot smoother. Turn it back around. Again, silent mechanism. It's insane. The Bachmann engines always continue to amaze me. Alright, anyways, let's move on to the MTH engine now. Alright, now for the MTH engine. Now, a few things to note. This obviously has sound and smoke, and the light looks like it's flickering. It actually isn't flickering in real life. That's my camera. It's something about the frame rate. I can explain it if you want in detail. Just comment down below, I'll tell you. But basically in real life, it's pretty much, it looks like a dim headlight. Now, if we turn it up, the headlight will, not be flickering, it'll be the full brightness. But anyways, in the meantime, because of Rule 17 dimming lighting, the Rule 17 whatever, the light is flickering right now. But that's not in real life. Anyways, I turned the sound off so we could hear and see the mechanism in action. So let's see it in speed step 1, 2, there we go. Back down to 1. So that's a slow speed control. And as you can see, that's pretty amazing. Look at that. And yeah, it's also silent, more or less. Let me turn it backwards. You can see that the center driver moved first. That's because that one's geared and the other ones aren't. So yeah, very, very smooth and nice action. I'm saying I honestly can't tell which one's better than the other. They both seem like very smooth, quiet drives with decent, both really good slow speed control. Excuse me, given the large wheel diameter. Anyways, obviously MTH is not complete without sound and smoke, so we turn the sound on and the smoke on. Smoke usually takes a few seconds to start up. We start going forward. There we go. Yeah, so beautiful engine. Alright, and that's how the MTH engine runs. Alright, one last thing to note, I'm going to do this real quick, because the DC engine does not like to be on input DC, it's really bad for the motor. But anyways, real quick, if you guys can see the color of the lights, I made it really dim. This is how they look in real life. These two are both very bright. This one's a bit blue, I don't know if you could tell. And the the K4, I added my own light to it, it's really bright, it's yellow. This is how the stock K4 light looks. It's very dim, as you can see. That's how it would look if you purchased it right now. But I modified mine to look really bright, and this is MTH's, also very bright, but somewhat blue. Alright, well, I was going to run these double-headed to show off the running characteristics, pulling this nice baggage express train. However, it turns out the MTH one does not work with DCC advanced consensing systems, which is kind of stupid. If you guys didn't know, MTH's proto sound systems in general is not really DC friendly, which is intentional, by the way. They do things like that just to mess with people, so people only buy MTH stuff. Anyways, yeah, so I guess I'm gonna run them separately. So this is the Bachmann K4, as you see it's on DCC, and let it run. Hopefully it can pull this long train. Just a little bit of wheel slip right there, but it handles it fine. Alright, now I'm gonna kind of cut the train in half and see if the MTH can even pull half of this train. Alright, I have now the MTH K4 on the track with the Bachmann one sitting back there, and you see the train is, shortened roughly 4 cars. Let's see if the engine can pull. So yeah. Oh, and look at that, it's stuck just like there. So that's unfortunate, and that was only pulling, what was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cars, whereas the Bachmann one was pulling 11. Let's try shortening this train even further. Alright, now I have it pull only 3 cars, so hopefully it can handle this. Let's get it started. There she goes. She handles it fine now. 3 cars though. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Anyways. Alright, so I'm turn the smoke off. There we go, there we have it, the 2 engines. Both very nice engines, but obviously you gotta make sacrifices for either one. The MTH engine is really expensive, doesn't run great. Well, it runs great, it just can't pull much. It's really gimmicky, has like the smoke and everything like that. Alright, and to conclude, with the smoke and sound and everything off, yeah, so I guess some final thoughts. The MTH one is more expensive, it pulls less, it has more gimmicks, the detail, you know, molded on detail, are you kidding me, for $500? That's insane. You know, stuff like that. The Bachmann engine, it runs great, it's heavy, the detail's limited, and the paint, you know, it's black and there's no red on the roofs and everything like that. So, you know, the detail-wise is a bit more limited. However, the performance, it's super consistent. It always pulls whatever you, it's pretty much, you'll pull whatever you give it, more or less. But, you know, if it performs better, I think that kind of warrants something, right? And the detail, although a bit lacking, it's easy to add your own detail. You know, you don't need a, you know, nothing's molded on, so you don't have to, you know, remove anything. You can just add more detail yourself, which for someone like me who likes to customize their engines is a huge plus. And it costs like twice as less. That's crazy, right? For $100, I mean, you know, this $200, this about $100. It's definitely worth it. I would definitely get 2 of these over 1 of these any day of the week. This is nice. You know, it's really, you know, it's a cool engine. It looks great, and maybe for beginners it looks good. But I think for someone who wants to, you know, add detail, who's not afraid of customizing, who, you know, enjoys working with their trains, I think the Bachmann one's definitely a better choice. So yeah, I hope that answered some of your questions. I hope that you know, it kind of, it's detailed enough. I spent 2 days making this video, and so much editing. I'm assuming, you know, I'll have to edit that tonight or something like that. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them down below. And tell me, which one would you prefer? Which one would you get? Anyways, I think that's enough for today. I'll see you guys next time. I hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, bye guys.